the presenters. We will be two speakers for the morning. And as I said yesterday, every artist or curators or researchers or intellectuals or whatever who are doing, we call it maybe artistic labor, intellectual labor, or cultural labor, we are from different locations. We are addressing issues of different societies and different historical background, and also particularly different social issue, dilemma, or critical conditions that we are confronted with and we need to respond. So it has to be in different forms. So today we have speakers from South Korea and Vietnam. We all know that in Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia, or South Asia, we are facing similar social situations, but those are caused by relevant historical processes, colonial history, Cold War, dictatorship, and contemporary neoliberal Marxism, and the flow of people and capital. So let's see how these two artists and curators and researchers, as I said, everyone has multiple status, right? So how they address these issues. The first speaker, Gim Jungi, from South Korea. Yeah, he is currently a director of Jeju Museum of Art, head of Jeju Biennale. He has worked as curator and art critic in South Korea for a long time, and he also has been in Busan Museum of Art and Daejeon Museum of Art as curator. And his work particularly is focusing on social art and try to connect social and local communities in site-specific projects. So that's very interesting. He has also carried out several site-specific projects, such as jury sound project, and he has advised several other art projects that are closely related to new forms of public art and social art. So some keywords that's related to his work will be public art, social art, community, 民众 art, and also art engagement, art artistic intervention. So let me introduce this title later on, but I want to introduce everyone for now. The second speaker will be Thuan Uyen from Vietnam. He is an independent researcher and curator living and working in Hanoi. Her work investigates alternative histories of Vietnam, bringing to light personal narratives rendered absent, unknown, or undesirable by the official historical record. Her projects often involve close collaborations with artists and investigate current social political context and their impact on artistic productions in Vietnam. So she has been general manager of Now Song Collective, a Hanoi-based artist-funded institution that aims to support and challenge evolving artistic scenes, creating rooms for new forms of expression, production, and exchange. Her curatorial project and collaborations includes a list of works that's on your handbook, so I'm not going to read them in order to save time. And we have two commentators. Today the format will be two presenters give their talk, and then we follow up with two commentators. The first one will be Lu Pei-Yi. She's currently a professor at Cultural and Creative Industry Management Department of Taipei Education University, right? 教育大学 or
education.
Okay, yeah, right. I couldn't find the English page of this website. She received her doctoral degree from London University, Humanities and Cultural Studies. And her special research interest is contemporary curatorial strategies as research, theory, and practices, and also particularly off-site art, and also issues related to museums. She has published important books on off-site art in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China. And also she has published several journal articles and edited a special issue on contemporary Chinese art. She also has been in charge of the future that we have not, 我们未曾参与the Biennale we hadn't participated, okay. And also that's in 2014, 2015 will be a macro revolution. Okay. All right. Those I think anyway will be reflected on from her comments later on. I think her background. And the second comment teacher will be Dr. Filip Kraus. He's a postdoc fellow at Academia Sinica, Center for Asia Pacific Area Studies, and he's our he graduated from our institute, and he has special research. His specialties is on Vietnamese history and also contemporary situation, especially particularly related to gender inequality. Okay, so I'll let Kim to have the mic. We'll start our morning session now. Okay, maybe everyone has his or her PowerPoint, so maybe we can go aside.
Good morning. I'm from Korea, and then I'm the director of Jeju Island Museum of Art. Jeju-dao美术馆的馆长. Anyway, so first I want to introduce my map of social arts within the relationship of social practice and artistic practice. During the high modern art age, there was no it was absence of contact with society and art. There is no contact point. Later, I want to let that. Read that. Read that. Okay. There is no contact point during the society and art. You can see that it is high modern art thing. But after the modern age, we can see the contact point here. It is very critical art scene, critical art, especially social critical art scene. It is point of contact, society and art. And then after that, we can get the intersection of science, society and art. It is activist art and community-based art scene. And then after that, it is union, public art. It is art and society connected with in the union. But after that, I want to introduce the other map. I think this is social art. So especially I introduce you critical art and public art. But between the critical and public art, here is social art. It is connected with socially engaged art. So, critical art is close to artistic practice, and then public arts is close to social practice. It is a kind of system of public, and then it is a system of autonomy. So artists can first screen. Yes, yes. So critical art based on the autonomous, but public art based on the customization. So it is different. But between the critical art and public art, social art make this kind of artwork. First one is community art and then activist art. Community art based on the site-specific art, and then issue-specific. It is on activist art. Especially, I want to change this issue-specific from issue-specific to agenda-specific. Yesterday we talked about this one in Chinese language. Issue is ET, right? ET? ET. And then what ET and agenda is different. So agenda means EG, 의제, agenda. Okay. Okay. We can set the agenda and then make a issue. First time set the agenda and then make an issue later. So I want to change. It is agenda specific art. Anyway, so site specific art are based on the community art, and then it is mutual aid and the cooperation and the coexistence. But the main point of activist art is participation, and then intervention, and then finally change the society. That is activist art. It is different from community art. So we have to make a foundation of the freedom from the public, freedom from the customization. So it is social art between the customization and autonomous. That is, we can find out the social art scene. So that is my opinion. And then I want to introduce some Korean first screen. Some Korean, I want to show some Korean artists. First, critical art. Go Seung-ho is a Jeju artist about the genocide during the 20th centuries in Jeju Island. and then it's connected with Gwangju city genocide, and then Tung, and then it is Fukushima. Korean artists live in Tokyo and then work about Fukushima, about the soldier. It is feminist issue. Jang Joseph. And then activist art about the national division, Dosunte. And then soldiers. And then it is connected with the national division. DMG. And then Imungsun work about the labors. And then Jung Tae-kyung, always his work is networked with labors, protests against the capital. And then he's based on the community, but actually his work is connected with the community art, but his opinion is he's not a community artist. He wants to be an activist as an artist in the village. So he always asks that, may I get some flower in this village? And then he worked with children and village people together. Especially Park Kyung-ju work with immigrant laborers together. So they were immigrant laborers and then they became artists in Korean society. And then Gim Jungi, one of his projects is Squattist art in Korean society. He is very iha. He is very political, critical art activity in Korean society. Feminist issue, Ipkin. And then community arts and many artists work in the society. Isanmin. Gim Jungi work in the village and then work in the Ansan city and then work with the immigrant laborers in Ansan city. And then it is community artists, Muniman community. And then Park Kyung-gyun, especially work and pedagogy artwork. And then Stone and Water in Anyang city. Work in the Stone and Water market, and then during 2006 to 2007, so many artwork in Anyang city, and then it is especially Samji. Some artists know Samji space in Korean art scene. After that, Samji space turned from the alternative space to farming arts now. So Samji farmer, now they work with the community arts scene. So here are so many community arts scene in Korean society. So now I want to introduce Minjung art scene to you. First of all, you can read my essay about mapping the society, but it is, you can read it at this seminar. First of all, I want to introduce Minjung art group, Turong. So during the 80s, Turong group in the democratic struggle, and then they want to be activists in the factory as a labor union, and then even though their major was art in the university, but after that they get into the factory and then became the labor, and then they organize union and then work as a labor, and then they organize the activists as laborers and then as artists. So I want to introduce Tung here.
Do you want to explain to them the meaning of 민중?
Yes, 민중. And so, even though their position was elite, but they get into the factory and then became the labor, and then work as a labor and then activists.
And 민중 literally means
Yes.
flag or
Yes.
people or multitude.
Yes. It is Udenka Prezen. So they are working with the laborers, and then during the daytime they work with the labor, and then during the nighttime they make this print, Udenka print, like this. And then they publish it, the art books, this kind of artworks, wooden cut prints, laborers and farmers, their mother and fathers. And then it is from the Buddhist temple painting. You know, East Asian culture has a Buddhist painting tradition. So from the Buddhist painting, so they developed a new style of painting, and then it is the here is the reality of their life, and then here is the idea of after their work, and then their idea mixed together here in this painting. And then especially they develop the new style of artwork. So painting is just one artist's own, but they start paint together, collaboration with the laborers and artists from the 80s. During the 80s, Minjung art starts collaboration with the laborers and artists together during the painting. And then is the calendar. Labor's day life became the subject of artist artwork from Tung artworks. It is a kind of taiji. So in Korea during the 80s, many artists want to become activists in the social field, but there was two kinds of art scene. So first one is exhibition art, and then the other one is spot art, inside art. We can call it 현장 미술, 现在 시행자 메이쇼. First one is exhibition art, and then the other one is 시행장 art, art in situ. We call it 시행장 art, 시행장 메이쇼. So I think 시행장 메이쇼 is the basement of activist art or community art in Korean society. So that's the point. That's why, that's the reason I introduced 민중 메이쇼 to you. 민중 메이쇼 is not just critical art. 민중 artists want to make art society within the museum and gallery, but not only in the museum or gallery, but also in the society, in the factory and streets, on the plaza. They want to make a scene or scenario. After that, but you know, Korean society get the process of the democracy 1987. After that, during the 90s, Korean society lost the energy of the social movement. So 민중 art scene became have lost their energy from the society, because art scene and society have the homology around the during the society have the energy of the social movement, artists gather the energy. But after the democratic process during the 90s, 민중 arts lost the energy from the society. After that, Korean society gathered the new energy from Daechuri. Some problem. So I want to introduce activists for community art scene in Daechuri village. Daechuri village lost their village for the three times during the 20s. First one is during the Japanese colonial age, the Japanese army abandoned that village, and then after the Korean War, American army abandoned that village, and then 10 years ago, from 2003 and then 2007, so Daechuri village had to fight against the government. So it is the documentary of Daechuri village. This one? So, this documentary was made in 2007. I was a director of archiving project of Daechuri village activist art scene. 마을을 사는 거지만 그곳의 삶의 기억이랄지 예술 활동을 기억하는 여전히 여전히 살아있을 수 있다. 물질은 사라져도 기억은 사라지지 않는다. 이런 거죠. 그래서 예술가들의 현장 예술 활동이 That is my voice. 역사적인 활동의 하나로서 읽혀지고 역사적으로 재평가받을 수 있도록 자리를 꼼꼼하게 챙기는 일이 매우 중요하다는 그 사람들의 들이온다는 프로젝트는 2004년도 12월 달에 황새우 들이온다라는
Trump
시작이
visits
됐습니다.
Camp Humphrey.
시인들의 신앙송 그리고 거대한 들녘에 3,000평 들판에 지푸라기를 태우면서 처음 행사를 시작하게 돼요. 예술가들 중에 일부가 주기적으로 방문하거나 또는 아예 거주하면서 작업을 했다는 거죠.
10 years ago.
미술이 또는 예술이 세상하고 만나는 방식 중에서 공공성이라고 하는 것을 새롭게 해석해 볼 수 있는 계기가 됐는데요. 대출이에서의 공공성은 미묘한 것이었습니다. 국가 단위가 요구하는 공공성에 입각하자면 하루빨리 마을을 비워주고 그래서 남한 사회가 미국으로부터 안보를 보장받을 수 있도록 국가 정책에 협조를 해야 되겠지만 그러나 마을 단위의 공공의 선, 그 마을이 가지고 있는 공공성이라고 하는 것 또는 국가와 다른 입장을 가지고 있는 사람들이 생각하는 공공성이라고 하는 것이 정면 배치됐습니다. 그런 점에서 그런 두 개의 관점이 어느 것이 과연 공공적인 것이고 공공성에 입각한 것이냐 라고 했을 때 예술가들이 선택한 공공성이라고 하는 것은 국가의 공공성이 아니라 마을의 공공성이었고 시민의 공공성이었다는 겁니다. 그런 점
거기에 함께하는 문예인들에 대한 호칭으로 들사람들이라는 것도 같이 그 당시에 이제 제안을 했었고.
He is a famous singer-songwriter in Korean society, and then his hometown is nearby Daechuni village. That's why he gathered many artists. Thousands of artists gathered into that village, and then one of the poets became the prime minister of the cultural department now. After the candle revolution, it changed.
쫓겨나기 이전 마을에 대한 시민 지도를 만든다든가 아니면 공공일기를 쓰게 해서 그것을 책으로 묶어내는 이런
제가 있는 작업실 주변이 대나무가 다 둘러싸여 있어요. 장기간 세우는 걸 예상을 해서 철 프레임을 좀 합니다. 그때는 이렇게 하고 대나무를 쪼개서 미리부터 좀 엮죠. 제 작업은 거의 뭐 노동이죠. 같은 크기의 뭐 170배, 80배 인간이 하더라도 그것은 뭐 한 10배 정도 되지만 이렇게 크게 작품 해놓으면 사람들이 항상 그 크기로 갔다가 또는 그 사람의 행성이라 하더라도 거기서 주는 시각적인 충격이 있습니다. 파랑새는 그 평화동산 만든다고 그런 얘기를 듣고 제가 생각했을 때 이게 이제 파랑새가 평화를 상징합니다. 그래서 이 작품이 있을 때는 거기다 생각해서 제가 스스로
그 현장에서 땀 흘리고 활동해온 그 작가들의 몇몇
This time I want to introduce artwork in Jeju-dao Biennale because you just saw bamboo statue. Like the title of that bamboo statue is the A Girl of Peace. That piece was in the Daechuni village, which is attacked from American army. But now, after that bamboo statue moved to Jeju Island. Shortly, I want to introduce Jeju Biennial here. This year we organized Jeju Biennial in Jeju Island, and then it was the title was tourism. So because Jeju Island is tourist island,
And then here is the museum, Contemporary Art Museum. And then here is Art Airfield. During the Japanese colonial age, it was the airfields. And then, you know, Nanjing genocide, for the Nanjing genocide, Japanese used this airfield from Kyushu area to Nanjing. So Alter Airfield was the base camp. Actually, base camp was Kyushu, but between the Kyushu and Nanjing, Alter Airfield was the other secondary airfield camp. So we have an exhibition in Alter Airfield, and it is the scenery of the exhibition, tourism issue. Many artworks in Jeju, and then here it is. We moved to this bamboo statue from Daeju to Jeju Island. And then it became a symbol of peace in Northeast Asia, because it used to be Alter and Jeju Island used to be the base camp of Second World War by the Japanese. And then not only Jeju Island, but also Okinawa. If there was no Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Jeju Island should be the second Okinawa. It was true. Jeju Island was the totally warship island, the end of the Second World War. So now the bamboo state is installed in Jeju Island, and then it is the symbol of the peace now. Anyway. 잠깐만. Okay. Okay, I have to finish my 하나 작업을 하면서 또 그 공성 자체에 대해서도 새로운 해석을 가져다 줬다는 점에서 그 회의에서 제가
나는 의미를 부여하고 싶거든. 그러니까 일종의 콘셉트 앨범이
2004년 초에 그러니까 그때 겨울에 굉장히 좋은 제안이라고 그걸 누가 하겠느냐고 한번 사람을 알아봐서 뭐 이런 식으로 했다가 참여는 이 정도 역할을 했었는데 여쭤봤어요. 말씀을 의견이 굉장히 궁금하더라고요. 어떤 분은 물탱크다, 어떤 분은 뭐 기타라는 생각을 하면서 처음에는
활동 현장을 찾아서 그 사람들이라고 하는 모임을 꾸리고 그 예술가들이 스스로 일도 만들고 시점도 정하고 그렇습니다. 그런 모습들이
성한 하늘 소름져 사
After my presentation, I want to talk about the Korean activist art and community arts in more issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Because today we have a tour in the afternoon, so I was told that we need to finish the session by 12:30. If we have time, maybe Kim could share with us some more clips or ideas. But now let's move on to Uyen's talk.
I try to keep it to my time, 30 minutes. So maybe if I run over a bit, you will be my timekeeper by yawning. So that will be a sign for me to stop. So I'm going to talk about, briefly introduce about the Vietnamese art scene and how artists and curators or art cultural practitioners use strategize space as a form of resistance and as a form of expressing the desire for artistic freedom or freedom of expression. And I think one of the reasons why we talk so much about art as a social critique is that what I'm talking about here is specific to the context in Vietnam and not limited to it. And I'm going to present work not just by myself but also by my colleagues at home. And why do we talk about art as a form of social critique? I think because this is in my experience. Artistic production does provide alternative narratives, but then also more importantly, it provides emotions or sentiment, a way of feeling such stories and narratives. So it's slightly different approach from just having concrete research or facts about such stories. And I assume that a little bit of background, but I will just provide a very brief introduction to give some contextual background about Vietnamese recent history. So the art school in Vietnam was founded in 1925, later than many other art schools when compared with Indonesia, for example. It was founded by the French, modeled after the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And at the time, the French sent a lot of artists from Paris to teach at the school in Vietnam. So the school was built based on that model, very kind of, high modern art, technique-based teaching. There were several milestones in Vietnamese modern history. One is in 1954, when the Communist Party took control of the north of Vietnam and the country was divided into north and south. And why is this important? Because it started this kind of era of fragmentation in the art development. So you have northern artists who follow the kind of socialist, realist art. So you would imagine there were a lot of paintings and sculptures depicting, the life of farmers, soldiers. They all look very masculine, all have tan skin, big eyes, and thick lips. This kind of iconic imageries of, very strong, and it was depicted. All the imageries were depicted in very bold colors, reflecting the revolutionary cause. And in the South, the art scene was also tightly controlled, but there was also influence from the United States and the West because of the exchange, and so there was it was more relaxed when it comes to abstract art, and so it was divided like that until 1975, after the fall of Saigon and Vietnam reunited. And so the system that had been imposed on the art scene or the culture scene in the north of Vietnam was applied into the south as well. There was tight control in all the aspects of life, brutal suppression of artistic expression, continuous censorship in almost every aspect of society, and more importantly, there was an erasure, a deliberate erasure of Southern artistic practices in mainstream narrative. So if you go, so in the museum, you would only see kind of patriotic, socialist, realist art, and only until about 6 years ago, did the Museum of Fine Arts in Hanoi introduce an artwork of a Southern artist who painted abstract in the late 60s. And another kind of turning point is 1986, when the government finally acknowledged that, the subsidized economy wasn't working, isolation didn't quite work. And they introduced this open door policy, which started with total economic reform. But nothing really happened until 1988, and the policies only became active in 1990, and that's when Vietnam was allowed to have private owned space. And before 1990, all of the exhibitions were had to take place either in the museum or in the space of the Association of Fine Art, which is an arm's length institution that kind of manages artistic activities. And so you could only exhibit if you are a member of the Association of Fine Art and you have contributed to the national cause, really. And so that's also when other artists started to, in the late 80s and early 90s, artists started to experiment with other languages, mediums. And for the first time, they were allowed, for the first time in a long time, since 1954, they were allowed to paint from their personal feelings and conceptions. Before any kind of artistic production that portrayed anything other than the revolution or the love for your country was suppressed or was deleted out of the scene. So that to give some context, because I think because of this, actually I'll introduce this as well. So this is an official document, and it says art and culture is also a battlefront when everyone is a soldier on that front. And like other soldiers, artists have a certain duty, that is to serve the resistance. So art is the communication tool. And why is this important? Because this notion even still exists nowadays. We have quite an intense system of censorship, and so I don't know. Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna bring up all the point. I don't know why it's coming up like this. So these are all the aspects that kind of form the working conditions for artists, art practitioners in Vietnam. So in terms of cultural policy, why I brought up the slide before is because it was a message that was, it was a statement that was made by Ho Chi Minh and Chiang Ching in the 1940s, in mid-40s, about how art and culture should only serve the revolutionary cause or the party, the government. And so in terms of cultural policy, strict censorship is applied. So imagine for every artistic activities that you do, whether it is a film screening, an exhibition, or a theatre production, you need to apply for permission from the Ministry of Culture. And let's say for film, you would have to send in your draft, and then they will come back and say, you know, you have to delete this and that. This is accepted, that is not accepted. If your topic or your theme is too sensitive, then that's it, you know, you will not. It will be rejected, and you can screen it elsewhere but not in Vietnam, or you can screen it and they will come and then give you a notice, and then you would have to go to the police department and report, etc. And in terms of the museums, some of my friends who are museology scholars have said to me that Vietnamese museums, the majority of Vietnamese museums, are like ancient museology. You know, it's very outdated, very irrelevant to public life. Nobody goes to the museum. Only tourists, mostly foreign tourists, or sometimes when they have like a flea market there, then people will come. And there is, in the Museum of Fine Art, there is no position of curator. So it's not, the collection, the museum collection is not curated. It's literally just hang in rows, looking like this, you know, it's like quite awful for me. And so there's no site of, there's no kind of medium ground to introduce the public to artistic practice and to facilitate discussions around that. And in terms of art education, it's also very, within the school, within the art schools, it's still very dated and conservative. The curriculum is still built, the curriculum at the moment is still based on that the French introduced in 1925, with only like updates on the surface, you know, like in terms of the kind of messages that are allowed, and in the kind of universal education, art classes are only up until they only exist until the grade 8. So when you are like 13 or 14 years old, and after that, there's nothing. It's not even an option unless you go to the art school. And so art exists almost it's getting better now, but for a long time it existed almost outside of public life. And therefore because of all of these factors, we have an apathetic audience. People don't know, the public is not aware of artistic activities, where they take place, what it's about, and they are not interested because they think it's very irrelevant to their lives, their daily life. And also because we have the existence of an art market in Vietnam is almost it's almost non-existent. There are several galleries, but their targeted audiences are still foreign art buyers. Slowly, it's getting better, and we are starting to have more local art buyers. it's still a long way to go, and it's not like a full-scale market. And because of all of this forces art practitioners to constantly, I think, as it is in the communities that I work in and work with, to constantly reassess their relevance to the wider society and strategize space as a way to attract public attention, but also to intersect public life and raise different voices, as well as facilitating dialogues about narratives that are not discussed in the public sphere. So a lot of my work as a curator, I find, is to do with facilitating this dialogue, and dialogue between the aesthetics and politics, dialogue between different space, different groups within society. And so now I'll start talking more about space, because I think I'm going to run out of time soon. So first of all, the first art space in the art scene in Vietnam is extremely polarizing. On the one hand, you have the art spaces and the artists associated with the ministry or the Association of Fine Arts, and on the other hand, you have independent artists who do not rely on government funding, not that there's much anyway. So a lot of in terms of the emergence of contemporary art scenes in Vietnam, the first art spaces were inside the homes of artists. So in the photos, we have Salon Natasha, which is a home to artist Wu Zhentan and his wife, and his Russian wife. So they opened up their living room in the form of a salon, where they would gather artist friends to come and then have discussion, play music together, talk about different artistic forms, and how they could change the art scene, how they could fight and resist against this system of censorship. And earliest experimental activities started inside the homes like this. Why? Because first of all, it's very cost efficient. You don't have to rent, you don't have to pay rent, it's your home anyway. And up until the 90s, it was illegal to open a gallery, or to have a private space where you gather the public. Because if you gather if you gather more than 15 people, then you have to apply for permission also. And it provides a safe environment for open discussion. It's where you can critique the social realities, the working conditions, etc. And then this is another space, also with the home. It's called Nha San Studio. Later it renamed as Nha San Collective, which was the first art space that I worked when I returned to Vietnam after my studies. And it's also taking place inside artist and antique collector Nguyễn Mạnh Đức home. So this is how it looked inside, where they had performances. On the top left, they had theater performances, performance art, exhibitions, it's all taking place inside the home. And then whenever the cultural police officers or someone came and asked, they would always say, well, I'm an artist, I make artwork, and there's this nice studio. And the people who come, they're not the public, they're my friends. So the authority knows that there's always hidden agenda behind, but it's not illegal to do something like that, so it's very safe. But still, nevertheless, this space was still forced to close in 2010 due to the official reason was because of a performance piece containing nudity, which was a part of the International Performance Art Festival, but actually because the space had been under watch for at least 5 years before that. And then they saw, the local authorities saw the expansion of audience, and they felt that was a threat also. There's a form of social gathering, and the kind of discussion that went on was quite, insiders said was quite critical. So they used that as an excuse to force the space to close down. And how did they do this? Because the artist, he also ran a small antique shop, and the authority threatened to take away his business license, to cut off electricity, etc. And then so finally all the artists that were associated with the space decided to move out and find some space else. And they still continue their activities until today, but in different sites, in different venues, sometimes at a cafe, sometimes at a foreign institutions' offices, sometimes on the street. And then I'll talk more about projects that are taken outside of the space, on the street, because it's the most dangerous place because you're exposed to it, but at the same time the safest place, because they can't, the police or the authority cannot monitor every street corner. And also that's how you get interaction with the public, with people who are outside the art, and trigger curiosity and so on. So this is a photo of an example of a project that my friend curated last year. It's called Into Thin Air, as in the art appeared and then evaporated into thin air. And so it took place in different locations in the city, and then the map is provided in different cafes. They still run all of their promotional activities online. There was not, but then the only printed material is this map, and they distributed it in different coffee shops, and so people can pick it up and they can follow. Why do we use this street? I mean, this is a pretty obvious question, because it happens suddenly, and then it's more difficult to monitor such activities. And because subtle artistic intervention may not catch the eyes of the security or the cultural officials or the cultural police, and more importantly, it intersects public life in a very direct way, allowing art to be closer to the public, because if you display it in a gallery or in a museum, again, nobody goes and see it, and so no conversation can be raised. And so it triggers interaction, the kind of very direct interaction that often cannot happen in the museum or gallery space, because it's kind of like an unspoken rule that you're not allowed to touch the artwork. Because if the artwork is outside of that, then they can touch, they can feel it, they can get up close to it. This is an example of an artwork in that project where there's this motorcycle thing that is usually the only people who can get licensed to run this kind of tricycle vehicle is war veteran, and that's a way of allowing them to have to make a living. And they, but then people also abuse this, so they buy fake licenses and they run businesses because you can carry a lot, and then you get priority pass, so you don't get stopped by the police so often. And so this artist, he's a photographer, a conceptual photographer, and a visual artist. So he took photographs of these people running the vehicle, and then he printed them, and then made them into cutouts and then put on top of the actual, and he just rode the motorcycle, the vehicle around the city, and then people were pointing, and he had a video about it, it was quite funny, people were pointing, they were poking, and then they were trying to take down the photograph cutout as well. And then another kind of space, then we have also other unconventional spaces, such as the spaces of sites of diplomatic events. For example, this is a photograph of a very well, a renowned Vietnamese artist, Chen Leung, and his work was displayed. This work was displayed first at the Goethe Institute in Hanoi. But then the Department of Culture of Hanoi sent an official letter to the Goethe and said you cannot show this work because this work is very critical of the communist, because he was using like a red scarf where students wear to school. And so it doesn't matter what the content is, there's certain imageries and icons that you are not allowed to use in artwork. As soon as the authorities see that, it's completely rejected, because even if they don't understand it, they want to play safe. And so it was being very sneaky. So in 2014, when Chen Lun received the Prince Claus Award by the Royal Dutch Family, it's a Royal Dutch Family Fund. So the EU Commission decided to throw him a reception in early 2015. And we showed this work there. And we invited a lot of government officials to the event, because it was a big event. It was organized by the EU Commission. And so they came there, they saw the work they had previously censored, and getting this very prestigious award. So it was like a way of very directly and sneakily and cheekily slap their face and said, look, you can do whatever you want, we still find a way to do it. So that's another side. And then there are some other sides. For example, this is a work by Art Labour Collective, which I think if we are going on the field trip tomorrow, we'll see their work at the Biennial. So the project was carried out in a children's ophthalmology hospital in Saigon, in Vietnam. And this is their way of bringing art closer to the public again, when they worked in the hospital for 4 months, getting to know the children, the patients, but also redesigning all of the rooms and the children's bed, hospital beds, and made the space brighter, because the conditions, the hospital and healthcare in Vietnam, technically on paper, is free. It's provided for through a system of national insurance, but it's very overcrowded, and so the conditions are not the best. And so they wanted to, yes, I have 5 minutes. And so they wanted to kind of turn it into a modular, less depressing space for the children patient. And also that and they would be there after the 4 months when they were working. After that, they were there conducting workshops for the children, but also stay every weekend to talk to the parents and the children about what they did, and then why they were doing all of this. And then there's another form of space, there's non-physical space, online. So this is an image of an online moving image exhibition that I co-curated with 2 other curators, and we wanted to examine the different approaches and perspectives about what is often called as the global South. So displaying artwork, video artworks from the regions that is often considered the global South, presenting their many Souths, also critiquing the way the way we understand our own context. But this, in order to realize an exhibition like this, it would have been impossible to have to display it in the space. So we decided to do an online exhibition where people would register on the website, and then a day before the screening, we'll email them the password so they can watch. And then they can feel free to screen it at any cafe, any space that they want. But we, as the organizers, will not be doing it, so there's no hair to grab, And then another very important kind of form of space, I think, is the archive. Because, like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, a lot of the personal histories and narratives are rendered absent in the mainstream narratives. So a lot of the erasure of artistic movements, of artworks, of stories from the official records. And so as a space archive, as a non-space, can provide discussions and conversations. For example, this is a presentation in the last Taipei Biennale about a group called Nhân Văn, which is humanism and works of beauty genres. It's a literary platform for critical thinking and experimental literature and art. And it was a movement in the mid 50s in Vietnam that was brutally suppressed. With some of the artists were sent to prison. Some of them died from being alcoholic because they couldn't find, jobs and work. They were excluded completely. And so, but the thing why it's important is because their works influence, I would say, 85% of visual artists that are practicing in Vietnam at the moment. Their thinking, their spirits, and their ways of experimentation. But not even up until now, individual artists within this movement have been able to publish their works, or their family have been able to publish their work. But as a movement or as a group, it's not the name of the group is still not mentioned. You can't discuss about it in a public debate. So that all of that led me to think about space, and space exists in both physical and non-physical form. Space allows you to, I think, because we're talking about spatial resistance today, I think it's very worth mentioning that the physical space and the ways you use different kinds of physical space is a form of resistance. The choice of venues, whether it be a heritage site, a hospital, on the street, in a museum, it can have a lot of kind of layers of meanings underneath. And then the kind of non-physical forms of space also allows you to present the things that you cannot present in physical space. But nevertheless, I just wanted to close by saying that I think when thinking about space, I still agree that physical space is important, because in a way, to a large extent, I mean, museums are sites that people perceive to get, that they would get information or knowledge from. It's a site that can legitimize artistic languages, especially the kind of languages that are not widely accepted yet or are still being contested. And it's also an important platform for showcasing artistic productions, because let's face it, art is very experiential. Seeing an artwork on paper or online is different from being in the room, being immersed in a space where the artwork is present. It allows the audiences to see, but more importantly, to feel, to get connected emotionally to the work. And that comes back to my point at the very beginning. You need to feel the stories, not just to read about it. And by that, I want to close my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Very important talk. So now let's start with two common features of response.
Hello everyone. Very interesting presentation this morning. I might comment Jim's presentation first, and maybe provide a little bit personal experience in Hanoi, and also the some censorship I faced in China before. And because I just got the tests from Jim, and you already have this one, and this one is talking about making the social art. So in the beginning, it's more like introduction to different approach. So when I read the text, I have a lot of questions about how can I know each artworks. because you just give the name and the hours. And for me, it's really difficult to get into the content. But I think in the morning you give the the second model of you talking about art in society, and that really can reference to the paper and put these four things together and see their relationship. So I think that one is quite good to match the readings and the presentation. And I have some questions for you. And firstly, I think the terminology, always the problem to talk about some art projects. So we have so many different terms: popular art, community art, social engaged art, outside art, as I created. And in Japan, they call art projects. So different terms, they refer to different things. As your term, social art. I don't know, maybe it will refer to the social engaged art. I don't know, because social engaged art is more like American, Euro-American style term. So I think when you make the term, you might really consider with the local situation or local social political circumstances. Then you decided what kind of term you use. So maybe you can explain more about what is the social art in Korean context. And the second one, also you present this morning about the Minzhong 艺术, it's the Minzhong 美术 in the 80s. And if anyone interested, there is some Chinese translation in ACT, and it's called Hsinchu Art in Korean and the Possibility for Change in Artistic System, written by you. Yeah, written by you. So anyone interested with the 18th Minzhong 美术, that's a really good reference to understand all the backgrounds. And for me, I really want to know more about development from 80s, 90s, 20s, after 2010s, and how they respond with the 80s Minzhong 美术's background, and what is the differences, what is the similarity, and what is the differences between these two things. And I think it's quite interesting to talking about the situation in Taiwan if we compare with Korea, because it's also the same year, 1987, Taiwan left the martial law. So we can see in the middle or earlier 80s, it's under the martial law, and a lot of artists use like the body art or performance industry to against with the authority or the government. And after the late 80s, we have lots of different approach developed in outside the museum, such as we have the popular art, but more focused on budgets, like 1% art, about the money issue, or some sculpture in the park, and also something about outdoor installation art exhibition. That's why connected with the issue of the local issue or Taiwanese identity or environmental concern or city branding at that time. And after 2000, lots of focus shifts from art to the public. So more concerned about the community art, participatory art, social engaged art. So Taiwan might be like this. So I think it's quite interesting to compare with the situation in Korea. And you might also, you also know some situation in Taiwan, and you might give some feedback and comparison.
Thank you very much. Maybe we can move on to, I think we move on to the second commentary, and then we gather comments and questions on the floor. And the two speakers can address these issues at the end.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to apologize because I was preparing my comments from Uyen's present PPT only. So, moreover, it was changed just a few days ago. So in some points we are so close to each other, I believe, and in some we are speaking about very different things. So first of all, nevertheless, we both speak about the Vietnamese art and how it is developing and about the situation in Vietnamese art in Vietnam right now. So please just enjoy my comments. So when in her presentation pointed to many problems of contemporary Vietnamese art, but the art, in my opinion, is suffering from slightly different problems. First of all, it is lack of material resources, then it is political control and lack of space, and finally it is certain lack of or among Vietnamese people as such. When it's correct, it is not all about the space. Many Vietnamese artists, writers and political activists complain about strong political control and censorship. But it seems to me that the main problem of political control in Vietnam is a lack of an institutional censorship in Vietnam. This is by no means a new problem. I still remember an article written by Thuan Uyen, a famous Vietnamese modernist, who in a reaction to the temporal abolition of censorship in 1936 complained about how now, when they already know how to snake through the walls set up by the censorship, the practice was abolished and entrusted to the penal code, under which everyone can be punished for only vaguely stipulated offense against the state and its administration. And under these conditions, he emphasized, the author tended to be more careful to explain their opinions than under the regime ruled by censorship, where also the wide erased space had its own meaning. As we can see from Uyen's presentation, this is still a problem now in Vietnam. In general, sharing the information opposing the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, threatening national security, disturbing social order, or contradicting national traditions, disseminating anti-state propaganda and threatening national unity, as well as undercutting the people's faith in the leadership of the party, are punishable deeds with penalties ranging from financial recourse to long terms of prison. As Thuan Uyen implicitly predicted, these legal stipulations push authors to self-censorship. In less artistic and more traditional media, such as newspaper, internet newspaper, blogs, or other social networks, the repressions gradually lead to a lack of constructive criticism. As a result, some party members called for more media freedom, but as Vietnam is a country in a transitional stage, plagued by many social economic crises, ranging from rather poor economic performance of its economy to administrative corruption and a ubiquitous clientelism, the majority of senior party leaders are still concerned about the party system and its legitimacy that can be easily jeopardized by free use of these platforms. Nevertheless, despite the fear of Vietnamese political representation and despite the potentially harsh legal consequences, many political and social activists continue to inform the public especially about politically sensitive problems. Although Vietnamese official media started to be more open in commenting politically problematic cases, albeit still far from perfect, platforms such as Thuan Uyen and Deutsche News can serve as good examples of good journalism in Vietnam. Moreover, social media, internet information, and activist journalism are not visual art, where the situation is much better. So, as it is not all about the space, it is also not all about the censorship and repression for the freedom of the speech. Yes, Vietnam is still a mid-income country with huge economic inequalities. As such, it is not that surprising that material matters. Since the Hanoi economic reformation, Vietnamese artists lost considerable amount of their time to support themselves. In fact, the mainstream of Vietnamese art was considerably commercialized. It is safe to say that lack of material resources, together with relatively tough political control, significantly circumscribed artistic life in contemporary Vietnam. But this is not the whole story. In fact, the financial and political pressures catalyzed cultural transformation of Vietnamese art. Since early 1990s, the Hanoi public space was invaded by new imported species of alternative and experimental visual art. For example, by various forms of body performance art. Starting possibly from Ding and Wang's matte composition in One Meal of 1985, we can see many artists and performers to occupy a more or less public space all around the Hanoi. Among those artists, features such as former policeman Dao and Tung, who dressed in long coat, crazily danced at Hoang Kim Park, or Chen Luong, who positioned himself as a rice man at local mine, created a perfect contrast between him and his surroundings. All of those examples should be mentioned. These performances were only rarely considered as art by art critics, who mainly do not understand the ideas and meanings expressed in those performances. The critics also always question the quality, nature, and suitability of these new forms for Vietnamese art and Vietnamese audience. Moreover, they get used to call this species of art as anti-art. But the new generation of artists devoted to alternative and experimental art do not only prove that art could be made with only little material means, but also show that these performances can help to express feelings and emotions that attracted large portions of the audience. If we are speaking about the low-budget, non-profit, alternative or experimental art pieces, already mentioned Nguyen Mani Zuc, Nha San Zuc, originally a shelter of experimental art, later turned into Nha San Collective and moved to a new species located in the cultural complex of Hanoi Creative City, should be recalled. Albeit the project was transformed into more mainstream art and can be considered as only complementary to Nguyen Mani Zuc's means of living, which is actually speculative business with Vietnamese antiquities. The point is that even though it is not all about the space, in the time of censorship, the space is still important. As this house was not considered a public space, the authorities do not consider the home space worth of interfering, even though he was able to mobilize thousands of spectators, including important party members. The local authorities did not stop him in his activities until he became famous, and he attracted so much attention of the people. But also other spaces, only lightly camouflaged as non-public spaces, can be sites of potentially politically sensitive performances. One example for all is Li Wu and his father's reading of Chuan Kyo in front of British Council in Hanoi of 2004. One paradox is that if, as Uyen in her report emphasized, the majority of audience at Vietnamese public culture and artistic programs consist mainly of foreigners, these spaces such as British, German or French institutes provides relatively safe spaces for Vietnamese artists to express themselves outside of the boundaries controlled by the government, but also attract many or large portions of Vietnamese audience. As such, if we are speaking about the politically sensitive art, it is not all about the space, censorship and money. Also, the younger generation of artists, albeit seemingly using different forms, only slightly change these old patterns. The new generation of artists may use more utensils or devote themselves to more complicated forms of expression, but essentially they follow the same setup by the first generation of anti-art performers who, meantime, became more market-oriented. Recently, Li Hoang with Phuong, Xuan Ha, and Do Tan Si joined with Japanese artists and showed how in Asia the technologies, social media and virtual reality transform human bodies, tastes and senses of reality. In compared with the first generation, they used more silk fabric, precious utensils, and may even have music background or tape on video and position on internet. But their performance remained low budget, yet able to carry deep messages to their spectators. So, as we can see, it is not all about the space, but the space is still important factor. Also, money are important, but it is not all about the money. Whatever the political censorship and representation and repression of the freedom of the speech are big and strong, they are not vital. Vital are people, and Vietnamese people and Vietnamese artists are not only vital but also capable, innovative and determined to carry on their missions. As there are plenty of spaces to perform, some money to survive, and not enough determined forces to suppress, I can easily paraphrase Nora Steller's conclusion and say that not only performance artists but Vietnamese artists as such will continue in their desperate attempt to display themselves in unconventional ways with the goal of someday being able to speak with their voices instead of their bodies and works. That's all what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Is that okay? We open the floor. All right. Hsinchu can memorize all the questions, and I'll give you sufficient time toward the end, because this is a final session. We really want to hear more comments and discussion from the floor. Is that okay? All right. Okay. The floor is open. Okay. Over there in the back.
So thank you so much for the informative talks. Actually, I have two simple questions for Ms. Lei. Yeah, and, my questions are, as you said, the Salon Natasha and the two homes that you mentioned are two private places. So how did you get access to these two places? Because it's a private home, so how did you learn about these two places? And the second question is, as you mentioned that museum is still very important to legitimize the artistic language. So, but you have also said that museum is quite outdated. Yeah. So how did you take any action to some kind of promote this museum to all the Vietnamese? Yeah. These are the two questions. Thank you.
Other question?
My question I have three questions, and I want to ask the Kraus teacher. The first one is, what is an artist? How do you think about the Kraus idol market, like the idol packages and the idol grammar or idol economy? Because in Korea, the idol market is very bigger than other countries, I think. In Japan, they think the artist is somebody to creating art like a professional person, but they think it is accepted for idol. So what about the Kraus? And the second is, I listened to 2 days, and I think the artistic intervention, like a society plus the art, it's like everything is. It means justice because it's no profit. Like the money is not a good thing. Because somebody will think the idol market is not the art because they need to make money and need money or for money. So so I think that's really things because in Taiwan also somebody
sure.
Okay, somebody said that artists will sleep on the floor. So what about the artist and the relation between the art and the money? And the last one is in Korea, a TV really show named We Got Married. So that TV show is it wants to create increase the marriage rate. So for the artist, does we need to tell everybody the truth is very cruel. The world is not very good, and a lot of heavy issues need way to solve. Also, or another truth, maybe we can to give somebody a very wonderful image, and we can be better or something. Which truth is better or what's possible thing?
Okay, thank you. Other comments, especially for those who haven't got a chance to speak up, you could address this to presenters or to general issues that's being discussed and raised in these 2 days. Yeah, please.
You mentioned that in Vietnam you have art schools. I'm really curious about what they teach and how the students respond to the content the teachers teach.
Other people? Yeah, over there, please.
I just wanted to seek some clarification from the Gim Jungi. You opened your presentation today talking about how there's an absence of contact between art and society during the high modern period. I just wanted to find out whether you are speaking specifically in the Korean context and what exactly is the separating point between the modern and the postmodern in what you are saying.
My question is for Nguyen. You opened the presentation by talking about how space is a form of resistance, but later on you shared that how because of the government censorship, it's not so easy to have art spaces in Vietnam. So I was wondering, how do you see this concept of space evolving in the art scene in Vietnam?
Art space?
Yeah, art space.
Hello, my question is for both presenters because both framework are special, so in contrast to in-gallery, in-exhibition kind of art. I was curious whether in both of your frameworks, one in a special setting of Jeju or the other in a special setting of censorship, is there still projects which have some kind of narrative engagement? So they more than just, by just I don't mean this in any way minor or so. I just was curious because just now probably because of time limit, I only see sculptures or on-site, very quick flash mob kind of periods. But is there some kind of narrative engagement in terms of, I don't know, audio tours or anyway, any kind of written? I suppose for censorship issue, then narrative is very delicate thing. You don't want things written down, I guess. But I was just wondering, or because that's also relevant for me in terms of thinking whether public art, whether it can still occupy for a longer period of time for more focused engagement.
Sure. I think it's time for us to pause a little bit. Yeah.
So there are a lot of questions. So I want to just repeat the question and then try to answer quickly.
Including this commentator, so.
Yes. So, yes, absolutely. And I think in the response from Filip, I think what I think he brought up some very good cases of how artists can still present their artistic expression, a sense of freedom of expression in different contexts. But then again, many cases that you mentioned, Filip, were organized by a handful of people who were very active in, strategizing ways to resist against this system of censorship, and also like the kind of mainstream art narrative. And you brought up also a very important and interesting point about self-censorship, because that's what a lot of art practitioners do, not just in Vietnam, but in many, many art scenes, whether it's political sensitivity, whether it's kind of some form of family history that you don't want to bring up, and so on. I think I just wanted to respond to my respondent by saying that I think censorship creates these working conditions that are not desirable, but for me and for many of the colleagues that I work with in Vietnam, we do acknowledge that censorship gives us a sense of urgency as well, a sense of purpose, and because you have to go through all of these troubles in order to realize your projects, there's an urgency to make it count, to make sure that whatever you are doing, it's not it has some relevance towards a specific group or community or to the immediate society that we reside in. And so for that, I don't complain about the situations that I am in. And then in response to your questions about how the access to these spaces, if they are private homes, these two private homes that I mentioned, they emerged in the late 80s and the early 90s. So at the time, art was still existed far outside of public life. And usually only people who were associated or within the art scenes, whether it's theatre, cinema, etc., they would come and they would know to come. Of course, if someone else from outside, they can still knock on the door and come, and there's no restriction when it comes to that. But in terms of the ability to advertise for it, there was none at the time. And slowly it got better. That's why the audience expanded, and that's why it was forced to shut down. It's with the emergence of the internet as well. You started to advertise through your Yahoo chat forum, and then later on Facebook, etc. And the importance of the museums in Vietnam are outdated. There have been various actions to try to improve the situation, and it has not been very productive. I recently, this is something that I hope that I'm still being able to work on when I'm back. I just curated a show, an exhibition of a group of modernist artists who emerged in this very critical transitional time in Vietnam in the 80s and 90s, called the Gang of Five. And the site of the venue of the exhibition was at an old film studio that was built in 1953 by the French and then later by the Vietnam Feature Film Company. And it's the only film studio that's still left untouched, and it holds it's loaded with collective memories, historical artifacts, etc. And so the director of the museum came and see, and then they wanted to create this new department of, art visitors' experiences. And I'm drafting a proposal for that. And hopefully, and my immediate plan is just to kind of provide curatorial tour around the museum, like collection tour. Because at the moment, believe it or not, inside the museum you don't see any captions. If you see a work of art, you don't know which period it belongs. You have the name of the artist, the year, and the title of the work. There's no kind of association with any movements or styles or anything. So visitors who are not studying art would come to the museum, would see the works, but then wouldn't have the knowledge of understanding it into the overall timeline. So that's my my immediate proposal, and I hope, finger crossed, that it will come through, and then I'll be able to do that. So hopefully we'll improve slowly. And then we work with a network of schools, and then we will advertise it to the school. And then there's another question from me about art school in Vietnam, how they teach the students. So they teach based on techniques. The art school it's not a liberal art school, it's only an art school where there's an art school for visual, for fine art, for filmmaking, or for theatre. And in the visual art school, in the fine art school, they teach based on techniques. So basically you take the entrance exam, they will grade you, and then if you have the highest grade, you go into, of course according to preference as well, but if you have the highest grade, you go into the oil painting department. And then silk painting, lacquer painting, sculpture, and so on. So they teach technique based. They don't teach you just think. There hasn't been an introduction to conceptual art in the school curriculum. Some teachers try to do it, but it's kind of conflicting if you teach one thing and your colleagues teach your students another thing. So that's how they teach. And the students, some of them, because that's all they've known in their study, in their academic life, they follow what the teachers are teaching. But there's a fraction of students who felt that, they've traveled, they've seen things, and they have the internet, so they feel like this is not enough. So actually, I have seen a rising number of art school dropouts in Hanoi. And how do I know that? Because I volunteer for many of my activities. And they said, I don't know what to do. I need a degree in order to study somewhere else. But at the same time, I feel like I'm wasting my time. So we are in a kind of a gridlock at the moment, and there hasn't been any resolution to that. I have two other questions. I'll try to make it quick. So space as resistance and the development and evolution of art spaces. There, in the past, since the 1990s, in the past 2 decades, there have been opening and closing of many art spaces because of the lack of funding. Because in the end, the organizers are just tired of having to deal with external factors, such as the cultural police. And three, it's difficult to do programming because most of the spaces that were open were artist-run space. People don't see art as a lucrative business to run into. So only artists or art practitioners want to run the space. And they get tired after a while, so there's a lot of closing. But in the past 3 years, we have seen openings, we have seen investment from the private sector into the art scene. There were two art centers that were opened last year, and earlier this year, one in Saigon and one in Hanoi, by 2 business people. And so we do see some hope in that, but then again, business people, they do business, they still want to stay safe. And they open up art centers, they have their agendas behind, whether that's an accessories for them. But so it's not complete independence, but it's better because now there's a forum for people to gather people, like a legal official forum to gather people. So there has been some improvement, for sure. And as I engage with the audience, this is a question that I constantly ask myself since I started practicing as a curator. Because of course, there's an authentic audience, and so it's more important that I don't want to produce exhibitions that nobody will go see. So we do a lot of, for every exhibition or every project that I conduct, I make sure there's a public program that follows it. Whether it's a form of a workshop, whether it's a curatorial tour, whether it's a field trip, whether it's a film screening, I always make sure there's something like to give a bit more context or artist talk. And then it's conducted sometimes not in the exhibition space, but in the school. We have, me and my colleague in our last project called Skylines with Flying People, we went to different universities. Instead of waiting for the audience to come to us, we actively seek them out and then ask for the help of some of our friends who are teaching in the school to gather their students. And then we'll talk to them. Of course, if they don't want to, they didn't have to come. But then those who were curious, then that's how we attracted them more. And I think it's very important, especially, imagine if you're a visitor and you've never seen contemporary art, you've never seen anything other than painting, then you'd be at a loss looking at a very conceptual installation because you have not had the exposure to it. So in such tours or talks or workshops, we try to kind of give a bit more context, a brief from introduction to the whole overall development of art, so people have some hints and signs that they can interpret or they can experience the works on their own.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, the borderline of modern art and postmodern art in Korean art scene, that is 80s. Before the 80s, yesterday we talked about Korean art scene influenced by Japanese monoha. From monoha movements, Korean artists, monoha. Minimalism. Japanese style minimalism is monoha. Yes. Japanese artist Yu Han is the specialist in Japanese artists. Actually, he starts from Korean art college student, but he moved to Tokyo University, and then his major was philosophy. And then he starts critical movements, monoha critic during the 70s in Japan. And then Korean artists influenced by the monoha, Japanese minimalism, and they start to make a strong power during the 70s. I want to talk about the homology of society and art. During the 70s, it was influenced by the strong dictatorship in Korean society. So artists cannot talk about the society, politics, about the sadness, lost. So they only talk about what is art, what is color, what is the shape, what is the form. So art itself, it was high modern art issue. After that, during the 80s, Korean society make a strong democratic movements, and then artists fight against the army government together with the society, social movement and arts. That's why I told modern and postmodern borderline is 70s and 80s in Korean society. And then she talked about the public sites as a museum and gallery exhibition room is a kind of public site, right? German philosopher Habermas talk about the public sphere, Möglichkeit. It is from the marble, concerts, and exhibition, that kinds of systems that it it organized modernity in European society. And then East Asia, Northeast Asia, Korea and Japan and China made modernity through the political power, and then exhibition room and concert hall, and then novel, blah blah, cultural academic system made the public sphere. But now that kinds of cultural public sphere became private mechanism, or you told me about the entertainer, idol entertainer. But everybody, even though they are artists, art space or art system want to make money. It is influenced by the market. Market only wants to get the money, benefit. So we have to think about what is the public sphere, what is the art scene. So that's why European people start to talk about the public arts after the Second World War during the Cultural Revolution, 68 in Europe. So I was born in 68. That's very important year. Anyway, so we have to talk about the public sphere again. And then they organized as a system public arts. But nowadays public art make the other strong power, because public art make public money, and then public sites, and then the other one is public interest. So it is not good for the artist autonomy. So between the public needs and autonomy, so artists have to make a social art scene. That's my opinion. Social art can make the different scenery of critical, social critical art scene, and then public arts in between that critical art and public arts, social arts, activist art and community art. It can make the social art scene. But historically, American art scene used social realism during the start from 1930s. For example, Venetian. So I researched on the website. Venetian and Jack Levin and Cropper, that kinds of social realism artists make a scenery of social realism, and then it influenced to Mexican wall painting movement, Diego Rivera and Orozco, blah blah blah. But it was earlier time of 20th centuries. 21st centuries, new kind of social arts have to make a different scenery. So we can think about the socialist realism. It's so different from the socialism. Social realism and socialist realism is very different. Socialist realism is a kind of public art, I think. North Korean art scene is perfect, public from the government power. What is public? What is the public sphere? In North Korea, there is no autonomy, and then there is only public sphere which is organized by the government. So we have to make a different scenery of social art. And then we can think about Joseph Beuys in German art scene. Joseph Beuys used the terminology of social plastic. No, plastic. Yes, that's right. Joseph Beuys didn't use the sculpture but plastic, because sculpture means make a get made by stone or wood cut. That is sculpture, and then plastic is get make a big size from the small size to get and then make a form. That is plastic. It is different. So social plastic means change the world, influence as a worker in the social scene. So actually, Joseph Beuys his major was sculpture, but he think he can change the world. He want to change the world, so he made the Green Party in German society. He worked as a politician. He worked political acts as an artist. That is his idea, social plastic. So 21st centuries in Northeast East Asian art scene, we can think about the social realism and social plastic again, and then we have to change from the political critic to social action or communication with the community now. And then what is the difference or similarity between the Minjung art and social art? There are so many things, but yes, Minjung art only want to make a democratic society at that time, but nowadays social art scenery artists want to make a feminist issue and national division and then immaterial artworks and then working class collaboration and then individual. What is individual? And then between the individual and individual, we can make inter-individualism. And then what is locality? So many agenda social artists want to organize and fight against that kind of things. So finally, during the Minjung art scenery, there was two kinds of acts. One is Jansi Chang Meishu, and then the other one is Xianzhang Meishu. So abroad people want to influenced by the Jansi Chang Meishu, and then the history forgets the Xianzhang Meishu. But we have to rethink about that kinds of activists in the Xianzhang Meishu scenery. So that's why I talk about the Xianzhang Meishu to social art now. So from 80s to 21st century Korean society. Thank you.
We still have a little bit more time. Will there be any general comment for this workshop as a whole? Yeah, over there one and over here. The one in the center. Or maybe this lady first and then.
Hi. I have questions for Mr. Jim, like about Minjung art and social art, because like at the first when I see the wooden card print and your PPT and throughout the ideas you talked about social art, that made me think about the art under socialism back in China, like at the time when
the political situation was still not stable, and that they cared about. There are artists who care about labor's issues, so they make art that connect with the socialist ideas. But that you mentioned about the that social artists actually in Korea actually focusing on the democratic context. So I'm wondering what's the difference between the social art in Korea and the art under socialism in China. I mean that I'm a little bit confusing about that ideas, because that you say that they care about much like those laborers who work in factory, and that they want to I understand that they want to focus on the feminist ideas, or gender issues, or they want to make they want to voice out for people like laborers or immigrants. Yeah, but I'm wondering that how people or artists or even curators look at such as those Korean artists under nowadays democrat context in Korean society. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. My question has something to do with the fact that I try to problematize the notion of multiple contexts from where academicians and artists and cultural workers are coming from. So with the parsing of terminologies that we use to designate differences between what is socially relevant, what is socially engaged, what is socially committed, what is critical art, what is activist art. This now brings to mind the kind of separation that perhaps scholars or artists try to make in connection with this tenuous relationship, because I had been looking for the term culture to be factored in the discussion when we try to ask ourselves, what is the connection between art and culture? Is art simply an expression of culture? Does art in any way constitute culture? Because by trying to define this, it can actually inform all these definitions, all these terminologies and vocabularies that try to surface in this conference, and perhaps we will have a new way of looking at all these concepts. I've worked with indigenous communities in the Philippines, and this majority of these indigenous communities do not have a term for art. It is a part of their life, everyday existence. Dance is a term that is imposed by academics, but they have always performed dance that try to insist and assert their right over their ancestral domain, and therefore is always critical of settlement communities and institutionalized form of harassment and subversion. Thank you.
Hi, my question is to Uyen. I'm curious, how do you see when, because it's like your title is all or not about the space. Do you feel optimistic when, do you feel optimistic when the gallery system or institutions is improved, such as they provide money, they provide funding, they provide spaces to artists to make things happen? What do you feel about the alternative spaces? Do they still have the privilege to have things happen in alternative spaces, or like the homes and the streets? Yeah.
quite interesting for the Jeju Biennial to have a theme called tourism. The reason, partly because I'm interested in tourism, the impact of tourism, and I think Ms. Lei mentioned something that museum nowadays, many museums only tourists go and visit museum, or when you have tourist friends coming, then you bring them to the museum. So can you elaborate a little bit on why was the theme tourism chosen and what were the responses for the biennial? And for Ms. Lei, I think you mentioned a little bit on, I'm interested in the impact of the reasons, economic and development of Vietnam, for example. What were the immediate impacts on the art scenes, for example, knowing that Vietnamese economy is doing quite well. There were a lot of tourists flocking to different parts of Vietnam and things like that. If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
I think at this point we really need to be very sure. We cannot really elaborate. If you are 3 minutes for each, and you can continue your discussion afterwards during lunch or during the tour. But please, 3 minutes for each.
We can read a book of New York MoMA educational program director. His name is Pablo Elguera. Even though he is a museum professional, but he write a book of socially engaged art. His message is activist, community, and then education. Art as education or educational arts, and then therapy. That 4 or 5 things are connected with the social art. So we have to talk about the social art more. So in Korea, 4 or 5 years ago, we started to talk about social art, socially engaged, socially intervention, so that kind of thing. So we have to talk about, especially next year, I want to organize a social arts committee and conference in Jeju Island. So please welcome to Jeju Island next year, and then we can talk it. And then anyway, and then why tourism? So you know Chijuba in Beijing. It starts from art village, but it changed from art village to tourist site. So we can talk it. It is touristification. Looks like gentrification. So we have to talk about what is the touristification, and then, for example, Venezia and then Roma cities now have a problem because of over-tourism. So we want to talk about over-tourism. And then, how about dark tourism? So airfield, I saw you Japanese airfield. So we have to think about what is the history, what is the dark history. So we have to think about the dark tourism. That's why we setting the title of tourism. And then, Jeju Island is tourist site. And then, what is the difference from the Minjung art and Chinese wooden cut prints? Yes. Art, sometimes art should be the propaganda. At the time, during the 80s, artists want to become propaganda, but now social artists change it. Not only propaganda, but also as issue fighting, and then activists, and then communication with the village people. So many things. So socially engaged or social arts should change their mind from propaganda to the friends, or fighter, or negotiator, or collaborator with the society. That's all. Thank you.
So because I don't have time to elaborate, so I'll just give a kind of like a yes/no answer to the question, and we can talk more about that at lunch. So I'm not that optimistic about the development of new art centers, and the reason I will give later. And there has been impact on the art scene from economic development, but unfortunately there hasn't been that much of a positive impact. And then we can talk more about that later as well. I'd just like to finish off by kind of having a reflection after the 2 days. I think, like you mentioned about the kind of problem with the usage of terminologies when we describe art. This is something that I've been thinking about as well. The relation, thinking about and reassessing the relation between academia or academic art, or we often dub as high art, and the kind of art that comes from the community, where the artist is a part, one participant, active participant in that community and the general public. It's something, in my context, there hasn't been a lot of kind of exchange or dialogue between the academia and the artistic community. So it's very kind of, in a way, it's very in its very beginning, origin. So all of these complications haven't taken place yet, but I have seen it. And I've seen how problematic it is when sometimes artistic productions, especially when it comes to visual arts, the visual. There are narratives and stories and research behind it, but it's more about connections on an emotional level as well. Utilizing all of your senses to make sense of the artwork from your own experiences. And for that, I do think that, and tying that with the title of the workshop that we have, which is a dialogue, in the inter-Asian context, then I think the conferences like this do not offer resolutions or anything. The best thing that we get out of it is actually having these conversations where we can highlight the similarities, the differences, the problem that we encounter, and hopefully learning from case to case, sharing that and learning that, and you never know, you may be able to apply that in your context. Or then you get to know, the different contexts that surround your geographical border. So that's my closing to this panel discussion today.
Very good, thank you.
I saved my video clip to the laptop.
Yes.
On the laptop. So please spread to the audience the video clip, please.
Yes. Thank you. We will be putting all the presentation, PowerPoint, text, and videos online. We will build up a platform to accumulate, so that, and also the network of each of the presenters and every participant. So this will be the initial stage for our networking. But I do want to use a few more minutes to close our mini workshop. Actually, we have been, every one of us, I think, when we deal with our own real politics at home, we sometimes, or most of the times, are pessimistic in some sense, especially when we do more analysis or research. But we are actually also optimistic because we come here. We practice, we do all kinds of work, intellectual work, artistic work, and poetic work, and so on. So, as I mentioned several times, that every one of us actually have multiple status. We can be an educator or researcher, or we can be we can take action, we can practice, but we are also a thinker and we are also an artist. So the moment that we are thinking through these questions, it will come to our mind that what is our dilemma in our society, or what is the agenda or issue that we need to address, what space we need to open up, what process we want to continue, or what battlefield, what history, what contemporary, and so on. Even who are our audience. who are the audience of our dialogue, and also in what form. So yesterday when we talked about whether an artist should be closed or open, I think an artist or intellectual or whatever activist should be closed against the commodification of everything, of intellectual work, of artistic work, of whatever. Okay? And also has to be closed and resisting against the flow of capital, the political tendency or the status ideological kidnapping, right? So, so that as an intellectual, as an artist, as an educator or whatever, we can maintain our own autonomy so that we can respond and react and have dialogue with our society and context. But then also we need to be open, we need to challenge our own limits because there are so many things we don't understand. We don't understand, we don't know because of our past education, because of our limit of the language we use, okay, in whatever form, video, filmic, or poetic, or fictional, and so on. So we need to explore our potential. The potential can come from exploring our memory space, our knowledge, but also different media. So terminology actually is not a problem, okay? Whether it is art or culture or intellectual work or activists, they don't limit us because we are actually committing ourselves to our problematic and also appropriating all possible language and media for us to express and address. So the language will not be coming from ancient times or Aboriginal languages, but we don't need to exclude them because we are always making use of even colonial history could be our resource for us to rebuild our community or our future. So because we are speaking here in the university, and also through this process, we are also reflecting what academic work or university can do to bridge with different forms, artistic or practitioner, and so on. So we actually also need to think museum or studio. Okay, but how can we manage every one of our sites so that it can be a site for gathering, for recreating, and for challenging this current trend or mode of thought or mode of language that's limiting us. So as a conclusion, as I said, we are building up this network. Actually, we have been working as a network for a long time, for the past several years. So the network means we will be building up our online website to accumulate all our efforts, every one of us here. Your reports, your thoughts, the examples you provide, and also your network so that we can make a website that's an easy access for every one of us and also for people for the future, especially young people, young students and young artists and young scholars from all over the world, whoever are concerned with this issue, right? But also with this network, for example, in the past few years, we have been organizing winter camp and summer camp for young scholars and students and artists and NGO activists to get together to discuss certain issues that we are all concerned with. So this year, this workshop, mini workshop, that is, we don't want it to be too formal, too burdening, but we want it to be an easy access for people who are concerned and who come here and we share this 1 and 2 days brainstorming and challenging and so on. So we will be doing this type of mini workshop or summer university or other forms of work, maybe even one-day workshop in the future. So every one of you will be linked up because we will send out information. So please feel free to notify your friends, your students, your classmates, or your co-workers and artists or documentaries that we offer one sort of Taiwan experience education program. This is something that we get a budget and that we make use of it. So all students or scholars or artists can make use of this to come here for 1 month or 3 months or half a year to sit in classes or to do archive research or to do fieldwork and so on. And also our platform here, this is our Institute of Social Research and Cultural Studies, and also our international program for Inter-Asia Cultural Studies. And this center that is our base, which is organizing these activities according to the agenda we have accumulated from our own researchers, okay, on campus and nearby campuses. So feel free to take this pamphlet and feel free to encourage your friends, okay, because we are getting more and more students and collaborators from Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. And so I think that will not be the end, and we'll be meeting some of you in the future in different formats. And for this afternoon, there will be a field trip. And Professor Lai Wenshu, and also Hui Tang, over here, yeah, will help us to make the tour, and of course there's an on-site curator. So I would encourage every one of you to envision or to imagine that historical site as a site for curation or for a site for whatever educational space, okay? Not only for local audience, but also for audience and participant friends from South Korea, Vietnam, from Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and the Philippines, and to see whether there are similar historical moments and historical construction, and how people could collaborate to make use of this site. So I know some of you might be leaving this afternoon or tomorrow. Maybe I will not see you, but have a safe trip back home. And if you are staying, just make the best use of your time and have some more drinks in the pubs or some visit in Taipei and Taichung tomorrow. So yeah, I think that would be the end. But at the very end, I need to thank not only the organizing committee that I mentioned more yesterday, but also our staff, including our photographer, professional photographer, Thuan from Spain. He's our doctoral student. And I'll just read the list, okay. Interpreters, Pei Feng and Lu Pei-Yi over there. You must be very familiar with their voice, vocal tone quality. And also 盛允、秦文、绿叶、雍正、应哲、美仪、西元. They are all our students and staff and our old friends, okay, who have been assisting us and supporting our program. So, and finally, they say there's some announcement. Please bring your machine back to the desk, okay, for the interpretation translator machine. And also, for this afternoon, I think we need to have a very, very quick lunch because you need to get together at 1 o'clock over there somewhere, and the bus will be coming, and the curation will start at 1:30. And if you want to participate tomorrow's field trip to Taichung for the dynamics, then please come here at 10:20. All right, so that you don't miss the bus. All right, let's give a